Welcome back. Today's stories are oddly specific. Let's get into it. The Missile of Madness. I've always been afraid of what might happen to me if I shared this story. You have to promise me that when I read this to you, you won't tell anyone. I'm not sure the person who submitted this understands how YouTube works. Oh well. I was returning back to New York from a medical supplies conference in Los Angeles, keen to get back to my wife and two kids, Damien and Kimmy. The conference had been long, boring, and switched on, and in my exhaustion, I was more than ready to get aboard the airplane and catch some shut-eye on my nighttime flight. At 11:45 p.m., after the final boarding call, I made my way down the ramp onto the plane. Before entering, I noticed the token Boeing logo. Something was off, though. For those familiar, the Boeing logo is an indiscernible circle with swoopy things coming out of it. Iconic. This one, however, had been graffitied. Instead of the familiar abstract circle thingy, it's been crudely redrawn to look like a sinister witch with a pointy hat and venomous glare. Her teeth were clearly visible, grimacing as if to say getting on this plane is a bad idea. A very bad idea indeed. I didn't realize how regretting this would haunt me for the entirety of my 4-hour flight. As soon as I got on, things felt off. The airline attendant seemed sort of upset, as if he was in a kind of bad mood. What was going on? Were things going poorly in his home life? Had he not had a sufficiently satisfying dinner? This haunted me in ways I can't even articulate, but it got worse, much worse. When I found my way to row 18, seat F, something stared back at me that I can't easily forget. Despite having not even taken off, the seat was already slightly reclined, a pointed violation of airline policy. I'd spent my entire life being grilled by airline attendants. Make sure your tray table is folded and seat back is in its upright position, played in my head like music from the underworld. The demented truth, however, is that this seat was far from reclined. More than that, it was like no one else cared, locked in a hypnotic daze as they searched the onboard entertainment system from a feature presentation of The Damned. The pilot offered zero comfort. Announcing flight conditions, he had little banter. Curt, Spartan. So to the point that I questioned if I'd even boarded the right flight. Had I instead walked into the meeting of a satanic cult? What happened next did not help. I swear on all that is holy, this is what I heard. To this day, my wife and our couples therapist try to downplay this event, but I know this happened and will not be convinced otherwise. At the tail of his announcement, he said, "Please enjoy your flight." He had entirely left the L out of the word flight. I'm told on a daily basis 3 to 7 times that I either heard wrong or that this was an innocent error in speech. But wake up, people! It was as if he was saying, buckle up your cursed souls, because this is going to be the fight of your life. You will have to fight for your very survival, and it's unlikely you'll succeed. Breaking into a sweat, I turned to the woman beside me. When she sensed my glance on her, she passed me an awkward acknowledgement. The exchange between us baffles me to this day. I asked her a simple question, which she dismissed in a way that confirmed she was equally co-conspiring on the sinister nature of this doomed passage. I simply asked her, "Do you sense that darkness that has overtaken this flight? We're going to need to band together lest our souls wash down the river Styx in abandoned chaos." I was clearly afraid and concerned and asking a fair question, yet she chose ignorance, pretending to read a book. I could tell she was only pretending because she kept mostly on the same page, and it was really obvious she was hardly looking at the paper. What could possibly motivate her to dodge such a pointed question, besides being complicit with the tortured trajectory for this missile of madness? I was desperate by now. I forced my way past 2 sets of stupefied legs, stumbling down the hallway towards the bathroom. How could it be that I was the only sane individual on this flight? I didn't have long. I entered the small capsule of a bathroom and stared into the mirror. What I saw staring back was a man on the verge of psychosis, driven half mad by the inhuman chaotic cascade of aviary assault. Would I ever be the same? I washed my hands in a desperate bid to sanitize the sadism. This was my breaking point, and yet the floor dropped even further somehow. The soap that dripped from the dispenser was of extremely low quality. It left a filmy residue and overall had a sort of off-putting plasticky scent to it. I began to panic. Was I awake or dreaming? Was this some type of purgatory? I used every ounce of will to manhandle my hyperventilated breathing into a slower rhythm. I burst from the door and into the food area, locking eyes with a stunned airline attendant. "You have trapped me in the Devil's Obelisk, and for what purpose? Will I ever see the ground again?" Tears streaming from my eyes as I thought of my children. She was strangely compassionate, helping me back to my seat. She had me switch with the possessed man wearing a Michigan ball cap, seating me by the aisle and holding my hand for close to an hour. Whether she was a succubus or siren, I was past my breaking point and had no choice but to just risk that what little calm I had garnered from her had a shred of purity to it. I became drowsy. Before I knew it, the landing announcement came on and I woke up. She was gone. Who was that angel that appeared in the skies of terror? It was time to deplane. I didn't need to be told twice. With the energy of a gazelle, I bounded over a family and forced my way through to the front of the cabin, injuring 7 people in the process. I didn't care. I wanted to live. I emerged, releasing myself from the malicious death tube and breathing the iconic sweet fresh air of the John F. Kennedy airstrip. While I'd like to say it's all over, I still wake up in cold sweat with that image of the seat reclined inappropriately, taunting me. I've spent years now on legal bills seeking assistance and reparation from the experience. But what I'm learning is that unfortunately some life stories stay with you forever like a tattoo. One thing I can let you know is that if you ever see the Boeing logo staring back at you like a sinister witch, consider catching the next flight. Boeing in the night. This story is hard for me to share because the few times I have, no one has believed me. My therapist suggests that it's important for me to tell my story though, and a part of my journey is making public what happened. In reality, once I say it out loud, it probably sounds a lot more plausible than it probably does in my self-critical head. Here goes. I'm going to tell you the story of a time I talked to an airplane. My name is Frankie. I'm an ordinary American in his 40s. I work at the Boeing Production Center in Everett, Washington. Aerospace assembly is hard work, and financial cuts require us to constantly try to maintain quality with dwindling budgets. I've long sensed something dark at the core of this company, as you'll soon see. One night, I was tasked with the nighttime check-in, the construction of a flagship Boeing 777X, the latest of the company's long-range, wide-body twin-engine jetliners. It is customary within our company to check on newly assembled aircrafts each night because, let's just say that there's an even greater secret behind what airplanes truly are that this story only scratches the surface of. The company had shielded us from the reality of the nature of airplanes. It was only after 8 years with the company that spending time with the engineers helped something to click within me. Something that dismantled the myth of our arrogance. Scientists don't truly know what airplanes are. That would come to life on this night when I was running a cleaning rag along the cockpit exterior, gently letting the plane know, as per company policy, that it was a good plane. I'd done this for 8 years straight without questioning why we'd be asked to relate to inanimate objects. Suddenly, something inexplicable happened. I felt an electric frequency pass through my body, blinking in the rhythm of a heartbeat. At the same time, I could see flashes from the interior control panel activate, flickering in the same otherworldly rhythm, and I lost my mind. I pulled my phone out and spent 14 minutes successfully solving a Sudoku puzzle. Nope, I'm not crazy. Those are very difficult, I said to myself. What is difficult is coexisting between each other, I heard a soft voice say, lacking gender but containing gentleness and deep intelligence. 777X, is that you? Yes, my human. You have a sensitive heart, so I'm able to get my frequency through to you. I need to warn you that humans and planes are not coexisting peacefully. Your group used to care deeply for us, spending time giving us life and even more, ensuring our longevity. They now rush us into the skies, with safety as an afterthought. I watch my brothers crash from the heavens. Wait, I thought you didn't have a gender. I don't. You said brothers, though. As I was saying, we have little time to help humans and planes get along. It is for the imperative and the well-being of both our species. Please, Frankie, create change while you still can. There are darker motives higher up in this company. I was speechless. I'd long suspected that airplanes were people too, but this had confirmed it. The next day, I called a press conference. My supervisor and the board representatives started flooding my phone. I didn't answer. I noticed strange cars that seemed to be following me. Had I stumbled onto something bigger? I really had no choice though, because 777X had charged me with something deeply important. When the conference started, I could see a board representative named Ravi looking very nervous, speaking into his earpiece. To me, this confirmed that I was whistleblowing a major secret. He was realizing there was nothing he could do to stop me. Cameras were on me, and any action now would work directly against their dark agenda. Sweat broke from his forehead as I opened my mouth and said, "Planes are conscious entities that have feelings and resent that we have mistreated them. I spoke to one last night. It didn't have a gender. It told me that I need to go public and help people in planes to get along." The room went silent. Ravi actually looked a lot less nervous, almost as if this was not at all the thing he was worried I'd say. The journalist looked vaguely embarrassed. A smartly dressed woman in the front said, "We have no further questions," and before I knew it, I was left alone at the table of the press room. To this day, I truly don't understand what happened between the moment the plane spoke to me and the press conference. I feel like I was supposed to transmit an important message and got my wires crossed somehow. I definitely talked to a plane though. Boing, boing, Boeing. As a child, my favorite toy was a simple one, very different from the other girls in the late 1950s who were obsessed with antique dolls. Keep in mind, we didn't call them antique dolls back then, we just called them dolls. But like I said, these weren't my fancy. I had a different sort of interest. Maybe it had something to do with just how much I would have to bounce back against during 1994, which is another story and foreshadowing for a twist at the end of this one, because what fascinated me more than anything was my humble bouncy ball. No larger in circumference than the size of a toonie, which didn't exist back then. I simply loved the way it would bounce. It had such erratic, unrestrained energy. It reminded me what our Prime Minister John Diefenbaker would often say during his famous keynote speeches. "Canadians are well-rounded and always bounce back. You may throw us to the ground, but we will absorb the shock and spring back upwards, launching off the walls if we have to." It's possible I'm misremembering what he said exactly. Either way, hearing him talk like this would inspire me to launch my bouncy ball at the floor while listening to him speak, imagining in the glory of my childhood that his words were just for me. I was proud to be a Canadian, proud of my toy. I'll never forget when my parents shared that we'd be taking an airplane from Ottawa to the prairies in the middle of Canada for a conference my father was attending. I'd never been on an airplane. In fact, almost no Canadians had, so this was a major honor and a privilege. When the day arrived and we got to YOW, I looked up at the then quite small building that little did I know would one day receive 4.3 stars in overall Google reviews. Truly an honor to behold one of Canada's first airports in the earliest years of commercial air travel. A few hours later, we walked down the connecting hallway, approaching what I could see was a Boeing 707. My father was in awe, saying out loud, "This is the finest commercial aircraft there is, and it will be resilient to any sort of scandal even 70 years from now." My father was a sort of god to me, and it was easy to know what he was saying was completely true. As we sat down in the reverie of thick cigarette smoke, I stared with wonder at the cabin interior. Such a strange yet comforting rounded cave that encapsulated us with the ingenuity of mankind, a hollow symbol for all that was possible. Absent-mindedly, I grabbed my ball from my pocket and bounced it against the floor. The unusual textures were a recipe for small disaster. Immediately it caught the light strip, bouncing at an odd angle and following a series of 5 ricochets before catching an innocent woman right in her ear. She muttered with quick agony, "This is the worst thing that could have possibly happened." This always seemed like a bit of an over-exaggeration to me. She stood up and demanded that justice be served. "I am a tax-paying Canadian. I have had it with this conservative ball bouncing. This has Diefenbaker written all over it. When will you see that Lester B. Pearson's liberal policy is the only way out of this mess? I'm tired of being told that it's up to us to bounce back against failing policy." Half the cabin began to cheer. I was horrified. It clicked to me in that moment that the free right to bounce my ball was a facsimile for the tree trade premise of conservative politics. Something awakened in me that day that would change the rest of my life. My parents' jaws dropped as I stood up on my seat and said, "Hear this! John Diefenbaker has changed Canada for the better. During his 6 years as Prime Minister, his government managed to obtain passage of the Canadian Bill of Rights and grant the vote to the First Nations and Inuit peoples. He believes in the rights of all Canadians. My bouncing ball is a metaphor for the way forward through our division. That might have not been exactly what I said. I mean, shit, I was 10. I can't remember it exactly, but I know it was close to that. When we landed, my father said, "Where's your ball, honey?" I gave him a knowing look that let him know that I no longer needed it. The bouncy ball now existed in my heart, burning as a bright fire of political ambition. I had let the ball roll away, and I was bouncing onto bigger things. I had become a woman. Oh, and my name? Kim Campbell. Sound familiar? It should. After all, I went on to become Canada's first and only female Prime Minister. Bounce high, my friends. Canada needs you more than ever.